A plant that grows on the surface of still water produces more protein per acre than soybeans, more biomass per day than any land crop, and contains all 9 essential amino acids in ratios comparable to animal products. It doubles its mass every 24 to 48 hours. It requires no soil, no tillage, no irrigation infrastructure, and can be harvested continuously without replanting. In Southeast Asia, it has been eaten for centuries under a name that translates to water eggs. In the West, it is treated as pond scum. Industrial agriculture never learned to cultivate it. The plant did not fail. The system had no category for food that floats. There is a plant that produces food faster than anything grown on land, not by a small margin, by an order of magnitude. While a field of corn takes months to mature and soybeans require a full growing season, this plant can double its biomass in a single day under optimal conditions. Even under average conditions, it doubles every 2 days. The numbers are difficult to accept because they defy everything industrial agriculture has taught us about how food is made. A square meter of this plant, harvested continuously, can yield more protein annually than a square meter of soybeans. More protein than wheat. More protein than any land crop cultivated at scale. And it does this without soil, without planting, without the seasonal cycles that govern conventional agriculture. The protein is not marginal. Analysis of dried biomass shows concentrations between 20 and 45%, depending on species and growing conditions. This is comparable to soybeans and superior to most grains. The amino acid profile is complete. All 9 essential amino acids are present in ratios that meet or approach human nutritional requirements. This is not a land plant. It does not root in earth. It floats on the surface of still water, ponds, ditches, rice paddies, tanks. It forms dense mats, sometimes covering entire bodies of water in a living carpet of green that can be harvested, dried, and eaten, or fed to animals, or processed into protein concentrates, or used to purify polluted water while simultaneously producing food. It thrives where crops fail. During floods, when fields are submerged and harvests are destroyed, this plant multiplies. It grows in tropical heat and in temperate summers. It asks nothing from the land, because it does not touch the land. And it was eaten, deliberately and systematically, across Southeast Asia for centuries before the West decided that food had to grow in soil. The historical record is clearest in the regions where rice cultivation shaped daily life. In Thailand, in Laos, in Myanmar, in parts of southern China, this plant was not foraged as a curiosity. It was cultivated. Rice paddies, fish ponds, and irrigation ditches provided the still water it required, and farmers harvested it as part of integrated food systems that produced grain, fish, and greens from the same managed landscape. The plant was called by names that reflected its nature. In Thai, Kai Nam, water eggs. The name referred to the protein density, to the small spherical shape of certain species, and to the way it clustered on the water's surface like clusters of tiny eggs. The comparison was not metaphorical. The protein content justified the name. It was eaten fresh, added to soups, or dried and stored. In some regions, it was mixed with rice or used as a vegetable side dish. In others, it was fed to ducks, pigs, and fish, which converted the plant protein into meat and eggs that humans consumed. The system was circular. Water plants fed animals, animals fed people, and waste from both returned nutrients to the water where the plants grew. Chinese agricultural texts, some dating back centuries, mention the plant in discussions of aquatic farming. It was understood as a resource that required no planting and no maintenance beyond occasional harvesting. The water provided everything the plant needed, and the plant provided protein. Colonial observers in Southeast Asia noted the practice but did not adopt it. European agricultural traditions had no framework for water-based food production beyond fish. The idea of eating a plant that floated in ponds, that resembled algae or scum, that had no root or stem in the conventional sense, this did not fit the category of food. The plant was documented, described, and dismissed. It was classified as animal feed or as a weed that clogged waterways. The fact that millions of people ate it, that it had sustained populations for generations, did not translate into recognition within Western agricultural science. In the 20th century, as industrial agriculture expanded globally and traditional food systems were marginalized or replaced. The plant's role as human food diminished even in the regions where it had been eaten. Rice monocultures replaced integrated paddies. Fish farming intensified and shifted to imported feed. The plant remained, growing as prolifically as ever, but it fed fewer people. It had not stopped being nutritious. It had not stopped growing. It had simply stopped being valued. The plant did not fail to meet the needs of modern food systems. The systems failed to recognize what the plant could do. Western agriculture, by the time it encountered this plant in any systematic way, had committed entirely to land-based production. Millennia of European farming had developed tools, techniques, and cultural knowledge around plowing, planting, and harvesting crops rooted in soil. The infrastructure, tractors, combines, irrigation systems, seed drills, was designed for fields. A plant that grew on water had no place in that infrastructure. There were no machines to harvest it. The mats were fragile. Pulling them from the water required either hand labor or specialized equipment that did not exist commercially. Drying the harvested biomass required space, time, and conditions that varied with humidity and weather. Processing it into something that resembled the foods consumers expected, bread, flour, protein powder, required technologies that had not been developed because there was no market demanding them. And there was no market because the plant looked wrong. It looked like algae. It looked like the green film that forms on stagnant water, the scum that gardeners skim from ornamental ponds, the weed that clogs irrigation ditches and has to be cleared so water can flow. Centuries of European association between still water and disease, between green surface films and contamination, had created a cultural aversion that no amount of nutritional data could overcome. Even the name used in English reflected this. The plant was called by a name that associated it with waterfowl, with animals, not with human food. The implication was clear. This was something ducks ate, not something people ate. The fact that people did eat it, that entire cultures had integrated it into their diets, was treated as evidence of primitiveness or desperation, rather than as evidence of sophisticated food systems adapted to wet climates. Water quality presented another barrier. The plant absorbed nutrients from the water it grew in: nitrogen, phosphorus, minerals. This made it valuable for water purification, but it also meant that plants grown in polluted water could accumulate contaminants. In regions where water quality was uncertain, eating the plant carried risks. Industrial agriculture, which demanded standardization and safety guarantees, could not work with a crop whose safety depended entirely on the quality of the water it floated in. And perhaps most fundamentally, the plant could not be patented, could not be bred into proprietary varieties, could not be controlled in the ways that industrial seed companies required. It reproduced vegetatively, tiny fragments breaking off and forming new plants. A single introduction could colonize an entire pond within weeks. There was no need to purchase seed every year, no dependency that could be monetized. The plant offered abundance without ownership, and abundance without ownership has no value in systems built on scarcity and control. By the late 20th century, the plant was studied occasionally by researchers interested in wastewater treatment or animal feed. It was proposed, briefly, as a potential food source for space travel, a crop that could grow in closed-loop life support systems, converting waste nutrients into protein for astronauts. NASA funded studies in the 1980s and 1990s. The research confirmed what Southeast Asian farmers had known for centuries, but the research did not lead to adoption. The plant remained something studied, not something eaten. The knowledge accumulated in laboratories while the plant itself grew, unnoticed and unharvested, on ponds and ditches across the world. Modern nutritional analysis has provided precise measurements for what traditional use had long recognized. The protein content varies by species and growing conditions, but the range is consistent: 20 to 45% of dry weight. Some species approach 50% under optimal nutrient availability. This places the plant in the same category as soybeans, hemp seeds, and spirulina, among the most protein-dense plant foods known. The amino acid profile is complete. Lysine, methionine, tryptophan, threonine, leucine, isoleucine, valine, phenylalanine, histidine. All 9 essential amino acids are present. The ratios are not identical to animal protein, but they are sufficient to meet human requirements when consumed in adequate quantity. This is rare among plant foods. Most plant proteins are deficient in one or more essential amino acids, requiring combinations to achieve completeness. This plant provides completeness on its own. The plant is also rich in micronutrients. Beta-carotene, the precursor to vitamin A, is present in concentrations comparable to carrots. B vitamins, including B12 in trace amounts under certain conditions, have been detected. Iron, calcium, zinc, magnesium, all are present in meaningful quantities. Some species contain omega-3 fatty acids, particularly alpha-linolenic acid. The concentrations are modest compared to fish or flaxseed, but they are present, which is unusual for a plant with such high protein content. From an agricultural perspective, the plant represents an efficiency that land-based crops cannot match. It converts sunlight and nutrients into biomass faster than any other known plant. Growth rates of 40% per day have been documented under ideal conditions: warm water, full sun, abundant nutrients. Even under average conditions, doubling times of 2 to 3 days are typical. This means that a small starting population can become a harvestable crop within a week. The yield per square meter, when calculated annually, exceeds any land crop. Estimates vary, but conservative figures suggest 10 to 15 tons of dry biomass per hectare per year. Optimized systems with controlled conditions and continuous harvest have achieved yields exceeding 30 tons per hectare. For comparison, soybeans average 2 to 3 tons per hectare. The plant requires no tillage, no weeding, no pest control. It has few natural enemies in most climates. Ducks and fish eat it, but production outpaces predation unless stocking densities are very high. It does not suffer from the diseases and blights that devastate land crops because the aquatic environment does not support the same pathogens. It purifies water while it grows. The nutrients it absorbs, nitrogen and phosphorus from agricultural runoff, heavy metals from contaminated water, are removed from the aquatic system and stored in the plant tissue. Harvesting the plants removes the pollutants. This makes the plant valuable not only as food, but as a biological filter, capable of cleaning wastewater, agricultural drainage, and even some industrial effluents. It grows year-round in warm climates. In temperate zones, it dies back in winter, but can be maintained indoors in tanks or greenhouses, allowing continuous production regardless of season. The plant is climate independent in a way that almost no food crop is. Floods do not destroy it, they provide more habitat. Droughts do not kill it as long as some water remains. It can be grown in urban environments, in rooftop tanks, in basements under LED lights, in any container that holds still water and receives light. The infrastructure required is minimal: a tank, a nutrient source, and harvesting tools. The knowledge required is basic: maintain water levels, harvest regularly, ensure adequate light. From a food security perspective, this is a plant that could provide protein in contexts where conventional agriculture has failed or cannot function. Refugee camps with limited land, cities with no farmland, islands with poor soil, regions recovering from conflict or climate disaster. The plant does not care about soil quality because it does not use soil. It does not care about droughts because it lives in water. It does not care about seasons because it grows continuously wherever conditions allow. It is, by nearly every biological and nutritional measure, one of the most efficient food sources available to humanity. And it remains almost entirely outside the global food system. The plant is called duckweed. The name is English, reflecting the plant's association with waterfowl, which consume it readily. In other languages, it is known by other names: water lentils, watermeal, bayroot. The smallest species, barely visible to the naked eye, is sometimes called watermeal, because the individual plants resemble grains of cornmeal floating on water. There are several species, distributed globally across temperate and tropical regions. The largest form small floating leaves, each a few millimeters across, often with a single root trailing beneath. The smallest are spherical, rootless, and less than 1 millimeter in diameter, the smallest flowering plants on Earth. All species share the same growth habit. They float on still or slow-moving water, reproduce by budding, new plants forming from the parent and breaking free, and form dense mats that can cover entire surfaces in days. Duckweed grows today on every continent except Antarctica. It appears in ponds, ditches, rice paddies, slow streams, wastewater lagoons, ornamental water features. In many places, it is removed as a nuisance, cleared to keep water surfaces visible, or to prevent clogging of pumps and filters. In some places, it is still eaten. In northern Thailand, in Laos, in parts of Myanmar, small-scale harvest continues. The plants are scooped from the water, rinsed, and used fresh in soups or stir-fried with garlic and chili. The flavor is mild, slightly green, comparable to spinach or watercress. In recent years, interest has revived. Startups in Europe and North America have begun cultivating duckweed in controlled systems, processing it into protein powder or animal feed. The products are marketed as sustainable, climate-friendly, and resource-efficient. The plant itself is the same one that grew in Southeast Asian paddies centuries ago. For those who want to grow it, the requirements are simple: a container, anything that holds water, a pond, a tank, a bucket, a kiddie pool, still water, or water that moves slowly enough that the plants are not washed away, sunlight or artificial light if growing indoors, nutrients. These can come from fish waste if growing duckweed in an aquaponics system, from compost tea, or from small amounts of fertilizer dissolved in the water. A starter culture can be collected from wild populations or purchased from suppliers. A handful of plants placed in suitable conditions will multiply rapidly. Within a week, the surface will be partially covered. Within 2 weeks, harvest can begin. Harvesting is done with a fine mesh net or strainer. The plants are scooped from the surface, leaving enough behind to regenerate the population. The harvested material is rinsed in clean water to remove debris, then used fresh, dried for storage, or processed further. Fresh duckweed can be added to smoothies, soups, or salads. Dried duckweed can be ground into powder and added to baked goods, protein shakes, or used as a supplement. The flavor is mild enough that it disappears into most preparations. Water quality matters. Duckweed grown in clean water is safe to eat. Duckweed grown in polluted water is not. The plant cannot distinguish between nutrients and contaminants. It absorbs both. This is what makes it useful for water purification, but it also means that only plants grown in known clean water should be consumed. The plant never required domestication. It never required selective breeding or genetic modification. It simply grew, and people who lived near water, who understood seasonal cycles and nutrient flows, learned to harvest it. And it is still here, still covering ponds in summer, still multiplying at rates that defy conventional agriculture, still producing more protein per acre than soybeans, more biomass per day than any land crop, still ignored by the systems that decide what counts as food. The knowledge was always here. It was practiced in rice paddies, documented in agricultural texts, studied by NASA scientists. It was eaten by millions, fed to billions of animals, and recognized by researchers as one of the most efficient biological systems on the planet. We just stopped looking at the surface of the water.